my screen's moved around a bit. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this sunny November morning. My name's Simon Ryan. I'm Locating Kent's investment director. It's the role of my team and I to create new jobs. We do this in two main ways: by supporting businesses moving to Kent and Medway, and then growing when they're here. Uh, we're acutely aware of how important our role is right now, and we're working hard to support manufacturers, developers, all kinds of sectors to set up and grow in our region. And we have a pipeline of businesses from all over the world that want to come and work in Kent, and we have a pipeline of businesses that we're helping to recover from the situations we've had over the last 6 months. I'm joined by my colleagues Sarah Bitorfen and Anita Glover from our marketing team. But more importantly, three movers and shakers from our region's office space market, and I'll introduce them in turn in a moment. But I want to set the scene for our discussion this morning. So we don't want high streets that look like this. And the reason high streets have become this type of scene are many and varied, but at their heart is the lower footfall from people that need or want or are able to spend locally. We want high streets that look like this. That means more visitors, and that starts with having people working within the vicinity and spending money locally. So why aren't more people working in town centres close to high streets? Now, I'd suggest it's because we have the wrong types of working space. Large office footprints are a thing of the past. Technology, flexible working patterns, outsourcing, different supply chain models have all contributed to the rise of smaller employers and the demise of large regional employers. We have to remember that in Kent, 90% of firms employ less than 10 people. So it's no longer necessary for businesses to be clustered together. We've decoupled people from place, and technology has recreated the effects of what we call agglomeration. That's businesses of the same type being close together. What does that all mean? It means for Kent has the opportunity to thrive post-COVID, to have more intellectual property-led enterprises that can travel to London nationally or internationally to do business, while taking advantage of living and working most of the time locally, and certainly at a lower cost than being in London. No more long commutes on overcrowded trains. So before we ask our experts, let me also set the scene for this session and your role. We want to find a way forward today. We want to stimulate more office supply. We want to that matches the demands that we see in locating Kent. But that isn't just about the amount of space. It's more importantly about the kind of space. So the kind of space that's healthy and inspiring, not just flexibly commercial. We need architects to create spaces that can adapt and evolve in real time based on unexpected needs. So this is your opportunity today to contribute to the discussion and make new contacts with people that want to make our town centres commercially viable again. So don't think this session's about eating your toast while someone drones on with a PowerPoint while you wait for the main event, which kicks off at about 8:45 this morning. This is an active session for you to engage, network, and create property deals, just as we would if we were meeting for KPMR face to face. So think of this session as you stumbling into me while I'm hanging around the croissants, which is not uncommon, with three interesting people that are talking and you thinking, I've got something to say about this. This session will work best when you add your input and questions to the chat box. And that starts now. So my talented colleagues will prompt me to pause for your questions and put them to the panel and to share your views as we go forward. So that's me. So now let's talk to our experts and see what they think. So we have a policymaker, we've got an investor, and we have a developer. And all three are deal makers. All three are working in their own way to stop the demise of our town centres using the catalyst of co-working space. So Simon Benson is the first person I'm going to speak to. Simon is managing partner of Monode Capital, a multidisciplinary investment and consultancy firm owned and managed by a highly regarded team of banking, investment, and development sectors with a focus on delivering high quality, multidiscipline developments in East London and Kent. Now, Simon's invested in a space in Maidstone called Wonder Hub. I visited it several times, including the event to launch it last year. So, morning, Simon.
Morning, Simon.
So, are you making any money from your office space in Maidstone?
Interesting question. I think from the pure hardcore metrics from a commercial investment, yes, we are. I think we're facing several challenges at the moment. COVID not necessarily being one, and I'll come on to that in a moment. We decided to invest into the co-working space, but we've actually created an incubation space. So I'm going to use a political response rather than a direct response to your question, if I may. But we actually saw it as a very attractive market for us, certainly across East Kent and Kent and the Medway areas. So Sunley House was our first dive into that sector, and it's been phenomenally successful. We completed practical completion on a 5,500 square feet in December. And then, would you believe, second week of March this year, we were full. So we were running at about 95% capacity, which is normal. We did have a couple of fatalities, unfortunately, very sadly, from the COVID. But actually, post lockdown, we've now started to see a very, very natural demand for office space for people who want to get out of the home environment, want to go into a professional environment, but don't want to travel into London. So we're now back at capacity, which surprised me, quite honestly. I thought that we were in for a bit of a rocky road and a hard time, but actually that has been very organic. We haven't pushed that space particularly hard, but what we have offered up alongside just co-working space is that we've created an incubator space. So alongside you and alongside other professionals in the market, when we've got new startup businesses coming in, and they're predominantly startups and I would call next phase or mid-sized companies, we've offered them access to loan facilities, grant facilities, banking facilities, and in some cases, we have invested alongside those companies, both in equity position and also looking at providing office space to help them grow their businesses and take a little bit of pressure off. I mean, very, very brutally, we believed in the businesses. So we're now running at capacity. We've got 2 other sites in Kent, which we're looking at. So I think by the end of Q1 next year, we'll be up to about 20,000 square foot of space.
So because you're a resi investor as well, because you've got quite a lot of resi units in Maidstone, haven't you?
Yes.
And Sunley House is the kind of building. It's like what 1960s kind of architecture, it's the sort of place that in most towns around Kent are developed under permitted development rights for resi. So you're actually seeing a return that would equate to doing a PDR type scheme.
Yeah, we very honestly, we bought the site with a view that we were going to convert it to, it's a 1962 Grade 2 listed building. Floor plates were very clean. We were actually going to convert it into residential. But actually what we've seen in town centres across Kent and places which don't have Article 4 protection is that a lot of office space has been lost to permitted development rights. There was a natural demand, and that demand came off the back of something that Maidstone Borough Council had invested into, which is the business terrace, which some may or may not know. That was running at capacity, and there was a demand. So we bought out a very, I suppose, London themed office refurbishment and put it in the middle of Maidstone, and it's been incredibly popular. We do have challenges in terms of the location of buildings, and the architectural element of buildings is very, very important, as you've quite rightly pointed out. We are fortunate that we've got a beautiful Grade 2 listed building with a lovely marble staircase, so we had a really good foundation to work off the back of to create an inspiring place to work.
Cool. Okay, that's excellent. Now, have we had any questions yet, Sarah?
No questions.
Well, nobody's woken up yet. They're all a little bit sleepyhead. All right. Well, look, Simon, hold on to that point about creative, great places to work, because I want to bring in Sanmi now. So Sanmi is the CEO of Rehoboth Property International, a leading real estate development investment firm. Sanmi's closed more than 170 million pounds worth of real estate deals, and the business has grown over the years to become one of London's leading real estate firms, with a team that boasts in-depth experience of the UK property market, and has successfully built, sourced, and acquired over £500 million worth of properties. Now, Sam is developing a space I know very well in Dartford, being a Dartford lad. I used to walk past it every day on the way to college. I never actually appeared there because it was the previous magistrates court, so I was never there in a professional sense, but I did pass it by, and I've been to see the site under construction, and it opens later this month. So Sammy, why on earth are you opening office space in Dartford?
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for having me. There's something unique about Dartford, which I keep telling people. Dartford is going through a major regeneration, and when you're doing regeneration and you're not looking at office spaces, when people move to your town, what's going to happen to the office environment? What's going to happen to these guys are going to be committing down into London? And outside from that, we as developers, we've looked at, if we're building residential and we're not creating legacy, there is nothing bigger than inspiring others and creating legacy for the next generation, because that's what is missing today in our community. And that was what gave birth to the co-working space we're creating in Dartford.
So, because you've got some resi, it's quite innovative resi on site as well, haven't you?
That's correct. That's the magistrate court.
Yeah. So you're not just co-working space, are you? So you've got because you've got some co-working space, you've got some F&B where you can have coffee and a bit of cake. You've got some small offices that people can take, but then you've got. And what type of resi offering have you got? So it's built? Is it to rent or?
So it's similar to the same model in London. It's called living spaces. All around London town, there's a massive demand for co-living spaces. A lot of councils weren't so receptive to this idea, but in the last 2 years, there's been a massive turnaround with co-living spaces. And in Dartford or around Kent, we've never seen anything like that. And when we started doing this, we realized that there's a massive demand for co-living spaces, especially with the millennials, the next generation. They want to live together. They want to do stuff together. We're going into a lockdown as we speak. And if we're going to a lockdown, imagine if I have my office space and my residential space together, my business will be shut down. I literally can come out of my house and just go to my office space and still continue. So it's a way of bringing the community together. And that's a key thing with regards to regeneration, bringing the community together. That's the whole point of what we're doing in Dartford. So
co-working and co-living together on the same site. Okay, and well, look, that's quite appealing, because you're right to pick on to highlight the kind of highlight the millennial sector, because of course it's younger people that have suffered most over the probably last 6 months. But you know, you look at there's a whole generation from probably 16 upwards that have lost out on the experience of exam successes, going on to college, going on to A levels, going on to university, or finishing university. There's a whole generation there that suffered. But equally, you know, if we look at unemployment that's grown over the last few months, young people, most of that growth in unemployment's come from young people, because they're in some of the sectors. So it's great to think here's space where, similar to Simon's, where young people can be more entrepreneurial. So, but Sanmi, you're not a charity, so it's great that you're having this effect on your people. But again, you're doing this on the basis of there's demand for the co-working and co-living. This is a business proposition, isn't it?
Very true, because when we had the research done, there's nothing like that in that community. So that tells you there is a demand, there is a market for that. Whatever you have in London, every community in the UK would want to have the same thing. And I'm so glad that Simon made mention. Thank you, Simon, for saying about your co-working space, because that has given us that motivation for us to know that what we've gone into, there is a market for it. And we're seeing the demand every other day with the kind of interest people are coming to site to want to take the spaces. So it's really good to see that this is thriving in Kent.
Yeah. So Simon, you said you're looking at other sites in Kent as well, aren't you?
We are looking at other sites in Kent. I think there's we've got some. I do have a question for Sunny in a moment, if I may, actually, because it's really interesting. But we do have challenges. The challenges for us to deliver co-working spaces from a commercial perspective is valuers can't quite get their head around it. So when they're looking at, traditionally, when you're looking at commercial office space in sub London territories, Kent and all the market towns are in and around, is that you can look at something, you can say it's a 5% yield, you've got a 5 or a 7 or a 10-year lease in place, so you've got a solid covenant in terms of its income. Unfortunately, with co-working, that doesn't happen. So to get the valuations right is really, really critical. We're lucky at Sunley House, we had a 5-year anchor tenant that came in who we're working very closely with, but they don't take into account the co-working space because it is flexible. There is no real ties. They can be in and out in a month, 6 months, or 12 months if they need to be. So raising debt is tricky, and I think that's going to be even more of an obstacle, which we'll get over in the coming months. But the key to delivering high quality co-working and office space for us is, one, the architecture, and two, the abilities to find the space to create these opportunities.
Okay, and did you have a question for Sammy as well before we move on?
I'm really interested in how planning works in terms of the co-living and the workspace, because we've had experience of working in London boroughs where we had a co-living space, which was office and co-living, but planners historically didn't really like it. So I'm really interested to see how Sanny got on with planning for that particular job.
I'll say this to you. One of the major challenges we've had with Dartford is the same thing.
Yeah.
We had to go around explaining what we're trying to achieve. And one of the things we demonstrated was seeing that Dartford is less than 30 minutes, 20 minutes away from London. And most of London boroughs, I have a friend of mine, he owns the Collective. And the Collective is one of the major co-living, is disrupted the market. It's so major now in areas like Stratford, North London. He has about 7 co-living developments. Canary Wharf is doing the same thing. He had the same struggle at the start, making council understand this concept. But with COVID-19, a lot of councils are seeing the demand. We're looking at a lot of spaces. And before we even talk to the council, we have a pre-app and we have conversations around this. And a lot of them are beginning to see that they have to change their planning laws around this. For example, I give you a good example of, we had this challenge in Dartford, and the challenge is about parking. And we said our model is around young millennials, and a lot of these people don't really drive. And I had to demonstrate to them what has happened with car clubs in London. Major development we have in London, they're car-free zone. We don't build car park anymore in our major development. And I said, the only way you're going to transform Dartford is by you trying to accommodate the car, what's it called? The renting car stuff they do in London, where you can rent cars and just zip cars. And I said, this are the ways you're going to bring transformation to a town like Dartford. And they were receptive about this. And I think we just have to keep pushing. And when they see that there's that demand for this, and this is what will bring around the transformation, they'll be more open and inclined to seeing that we can do this. Because I've done this I've had a lot of my clients or my colleagues have done this in London, and we just use the same template and bring it back into areas like Kent.
Brilliant. Sammy, it's almost like we planned this, because we're lucky because we've got a chief executive of a local authority with us, so we can put this to William. So William's been chief exec Tunbridge Wells since 2009, and prior to that he was deputy chief exec and has held senior manager roles in other local governments. So his background is also in international development, and I can't think of anyone better to kind of talk about managing change in development and communities than William. So William, thanks for joining us this morning. Before we look at Sammy's particular point, which is really interesting about how we change planners' minds, which I think most people involved in development will understand that's never an easy task. Do you think this kind of space is really going to change the viability of Tunbridge Wells town centre?
Yes. So perhaps if I just spend 30 seconds just saying a bit about Tunbridge Wells. So Royal Tunbridge Wells, which is the town, Tunbridge Wells is the borough. It's always been a destination town for the past 400 years. So originally people came for the curative properties of the spring, but more recently it's to shop, eat, visit, enjoy our cultural attractions and so on. It's also a really entrepreneurial place, and we've got some of the highest levels of business startups and survival rates in the county. And Nesta has it listed as being one of the top 20 travel to work areas in its Creative Nation report in terms of co-working and creativity. So we've set our stall out as being a cultural destination, and to be truthful, that was a bit of a historic ambition, which was around making it a more attractive place to live and to draw people into the town for retail and so on. But actually, as time's gone on, it's become apparent that there are real strong links between the cultural sector and the creative sector. So we're in the process of redeveloping a cultural learning hub, a £19 million cultural hub. And town centres have definitely been changing. And for a number of years, and the pandemic's further exacerbated and accelerated that trend. And I'd have said to you, before the pandemic, we were quite well placed to weather that storm. We've got a number of independent shops and a great reputation, but the pandemic has hit us hard. It's hit, hospitality and retail really, really hard. But I do think, Simon, that one of the silver linings to this very, very dark cloud is the fact that it's accelerated changes in offices by probably a decade, and people have suddenly realised that the world doesn't stop turning if they stay at home. And in Tunbridge Wells, they've realised it's quite nice to save £5,000 a year on a train ticket and 4 hours a day stuck in a kind of metal tube. So I'm really, really keen to push that and to say to people, don't treat this as a temporary thing, think about it more generally. And exactly as Simon says, we found that with our co-working space, because it's easy in, easy out, people shot out to begin with. But I think people are now realising that actually innovation is a contact sport, social contact's really important, and our co-working and flexible spaces are filling right back up again. And that's something we'd be really keen to capitalise on. And we're having a look at our own assets. So, we've got a town hall that we're rattling around in. Again, Simon mentioned permitted development rights. We've lost over 200,000 square feet in Tunbridge Wells to permitted development rights. And we have introduced Article 4 directions to preserve that. But nevertheless, there is a dearth of offices. Just quickly to respond to what Sanmi said, we're in the process of producing our local plan, and we've taken the opportunity to look at precisely what he's mentioning, what we're doing with town centres, whether and how we can convert retail to sort of flexible working spaces. And I have been talking to developers about precisely what he was saying about combining living and working. And just as a little additional aside, we do have a co-wheel scheme in Tunbridge Wells, a sort of car sharing kind of club. And it's the usage in Tunbridge Wells is higher than anywhere else that they've set up in the country.
Excellent. And so, given the cultural and creative vibe, for want of a better word, of the town centre of Royal Tunbridge Wells, what role do you see? Would you? Is it something you see as part of the solution for the viability of the town?
Absolutely, and I think again during lockdown, when things started reopening again, I think our kind of retailers and hospitality businesses were very good at converting to new models, whether that's delivery or click and collect. And I think at a time when people, couldn't get toilet rolls or food, people kind of really appreciated that. So I think what's kind of seen them through is two things. One, it's that loyalty where people have recognised how well local businesses have done for them, but also the fact that people have been working locally. And I think that kind of symbiotic kind of relationship has really, really helped. And I suspect that some big employers will be looking at downsizing. They'll be thinking, blimey, do we really need all this space? We're certainly looking at that as a council. And what I'm hoping is that we can repurpose some of that space to flexible or co-working space. to preserve the footfall in the town centre. And I think, you know, it's often said, isn't it, that town centres are dying, they're just changing. And I think one of those changes is, you know, before the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about being more experiential. And in Tunbridge Wells, we've got the Common, we've got cultural attractions, we've got kind of amazing eateries, public open spaces, etc. But I think offices are a really key part of that. And it's certainly something businesses are very keen on.
Cool, excellent. And but look, and I think when we say flexible office, because of course I think it's always worth taking a moment to think about what we talk about co-working, because although we're talking the imagination of co-working are these open core hipster kind of spaces, in reality most of the commercial value comes from the small office units. That they're the ones where the developer makes the most money, is in the kind of 2, 5, 20 desk kind of spaces. And when you talk about flexible, we kind of think, well, you know, is someone going to come take that sort of space for a year or 6 months? But then I was talking to an agent in London only this week, and they were talking about, well, flexible now is they've got landlords doing 5-year leases with 2-year breaks, and you know, no rent review in that time, or guaranteed no rent review in 5 years as well. So you know, their flexibility is changing a lot. And I think, again, from our experience at Locating Kent, we're seeing demand for people wanting to come out of London, and but they don't want to come and invest in a 5-year, 10-year lease. They want to come and take something more at will. So given that, William, I'm going to just stay with you for a moment. So given that we've got guys like Sanmi and Simon here that want to invest and find those sites, putting aside the you know, there's the kind of planning and educating the planners, which you know, is a perennial thing. What else do you think Tunbridge Wells could be doing to help these guys find sites to make things happen?
So Sammy's just put something in the sidebar about whether we're looking at JV opportunities. And I think potentially, so I think some of the things we could do. So the first thing is the kind of attitude and disposition of planners. Now, this is probably a dangerous thing for me to say, but I'd be really interested to hear if anyone in the audience had anything but a positive experience with us. So one of the things that I've been really, really clear about, and we've got a fantastic head of planning, is that we are open for business and we're can do. And, you know, I sort of drill into them the kind of discipline of saying, you know, yes, but, not no, because. And actually, I've had some really, really positive feedback from developers. And that's not to say we're kind of anyone's, you know, poodle. You know, we're very, very clear about what people can and can't do. But that's exactly what developers are looking for. They would much rather know there's not a prayer of you being able to develop, you know, that site rather than wasting money on it. But where there is potential, we work very hard to try and bring that forward. In terms of other things we can do, I think we're looking to leverage our own estates. So we do own a number of properties. We've got sort of £100 million worth of assets in and around the town centre, including, you know, the town hall and various others. We own ASK Pizza that has sort of ceased trading. And I think in ordinary times, I'd be quite miserable about that because that's an income stream lost to us. But I think it now represents an opportunity. And we're working with the local business improvement district and Locating Kent to try and promote that and promote both amongst people looking to provide flexible office space and those seeking to use it, and try and kind of bring the two together.
Okay, cool. And now, so generally to all three of you, you know, we're talking about a commercial proposition here of a type of workspace that can regenerate a town. So where do you think the people are going to live? Obviously Sammy, so they're in many ways they live above the shop, but they won't be all of your commercial tenants, Sammy, of course, but some of them literally live above the shop, which is, I think, fantastic. But are these local people, are these people that are commuting to the towns, or is this about people living and working in the town again, like we did perhaps more so when we were growing up, so where our parents tended to work locally, and which meant they could come to sports day and you know, after school stuff. Do you think post-COVID that's the future of towns and workspace, that we live and work more, or is that me just living in a kind of fantasy world? Any one of you?
Oh, all right, well, I'll pop in quickly. So I'd say a couple of things to that. So the first is, I think it will be a mix. And we've been doing regular pulse surveys with our staff, and what they're saying is their ideal blend would be 2 or 3 days in the office and 2 or 3 days at home. So I think there'll be some people that will want to work, permanently nearby, others that will want, I think one of the things we might see is, London employers having kind of hub and spoke models, where there'll be a hub in London, then spokes out in regional towns and cities. So I think that's something that we would want to exploit. There's something else I was going to mention as well. I'll let Simon and Sanmi come in when I try and remember what it was.
Simon, we have seen, certainly at Wonder Hub, we've seen a lot of local businesses coming forward. I reckon about between 12 and 15% of our occupants at Sunley House are what I would call international clients. They work in London, they travel around the world. We've got a big exhibition company from Australia. They needed somewhere for someone to relocate, a bit like the hub and spoke model. But I think what we're really seeing is, which is something that I don't think anyone's touched on, is that over the COVID and the pandemic, is that people, and me personally, I work at home a lot on my own because the team are now working from home remotely, is I do actually miss human interaction massively. And for me, or to be able to go into Sunley House once or twice a week is actually a bit of a boost for morale. And I think we're going to start to see that. People are going to start to get tired of working in the spare room with the kids and the dog shouting in the background. And actually, from an employer's perspective, it's very, very important that you get FaceTime with your staff, because there are nuances that you learn and you understand about people when you're looking at them face to face. Family life, work-life balance, what's going on, can we help with anything? And that has all been missing over the last 8, 9, 10 months. And I think that's going to come back with abundance, but in a slightly different format.
Cool. Okay. And look, Sammy, because you talked about Zipcar as well, and I'm thinking equally, does this affect, do transport planners need to think about how this changes life as well? Because, I can remember the first time I met William, and we were both, I can't remember the exact term, but we were kind of digital envoys of some kind, William, weren't we? And I was about an hour late for a meeting in Tunbridge Wells, and not knowing who William was, I was moaning about the traffic in Tunbridge Wells. I was like, whose idea was to do it in Tunbridge Wells? And it's like, oh yeah, I'm the chief executive. And you think, I want the world, the ground to swallow me up. But this is, in many ways, if we are living and working locally, chance for us to travel around differently as well, and to use different, but transport tends to be in Kent about getting people to the station so they can get to London. How do we build that into our plans? Sammy, have you thought about that? Because like you say, you're a London investor, and transport's different in London to we see in town centres here.
Yeah, I think if you look, take for example, the Uber bicycle, Santander bicycles and all that, I've never seen that in Kent. And if you want to get people to cycle to work, you can provide that, bring that into Kent. And that would, because I know that even in Dartford, we've got major issues around traffic. And the way you can kind of change this is getting people to start cycling to work. That would be a very easy way on the transport. In our facility, we're going to be providing about 20 bicycles for people that want to, at the end of the day, we can take it back to the EO when we finish at 5 or 6 o'clock. We're going to encourage people to cycle to work. So those are the ways where you can help around with the transport issue. And that we said that during our planning application as well.
So, Simon, can I just remember the other point I was going to make, which is that so Kent is experiencing and will continue to experience very significant housing growth. And one of the ways in which most districts, or a lot of districts, are looking to deal with that is, rather than cramming more homes into existing settlements or building on the kind of green areas outside of town, they're looking at garden settlements. And Tunbridge Wells, through our local plan, there are 2 garden settlements that we're pursuing, with over 6,000 homes between them. And I think one of the opportunities they present is to think right from the get-go how you bake these sorts of ideas in. So sustainable transport, working, co-working space, and actually to make sure that, we are truly developing, sustainable communities rather than, dormitory towns.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for that point, William, of new developments. Just as anything over 300 units would have a school, I think anything over 100 units should have space for people to work, because of course new home building with the constraints on getting as many units as you can onto a piece of land are not necessarily appropriate for working from home. And it's like, Simon's in his car today, Sammy's in the office, you're at home, I'm at home, and so Sarah's at home, and we're quite lucky we've got nice spaces to work from. But I have got colleagues and clients that are working on their dining room tables, on the sofa and what have you. So new homes are not necessarily built for working at home. So having co-working space close to new developments, I think, is really important. And I think we need to explore planning policy around that, and equally commercial deals. Now, time is creeping up on us. So really, I've got about time for each of you to have 60 seconds. So if you could just tell, I guess, Sammy and Simon, if you could tell William, or William, if you want to tell the investors behind this, what are you looking for to make more of this happen? Because I think it's fair to say we've demonstrated there's demand for this, there's commercial activity for this, and so it's viable for town centres, it's viable for investors. What's one thing that would make it easier for more of this to happen? Let's start with Sammy.
One major one, it's planning policies. As Simon raised that when he was speaking. If we can see that the councils will introduce more flexibility around their planning policies, that would help a great deal. The second one would be support from the councils for developers and investors like us, especially in the area of JV, because the challenge you have is you don't really make so much in return on investment because it's Kent. So if we've got JV opportunities, it would help us to see that we can actually make back our money, and that would help developers come into areas like Kent.
Okay, cool. And Sammy, is that in terms of joint capital investment, or is it de-risking where they can say, well, I tell you what, I'll rent the desks until you rent them out, or how would you see that happening?
It will be more of a flexibility around, if you have a joint venture, for example, return on investment for the developers in terms of even the council even becoming part of the consortium that might own the development as well, and they're getting a return back maybe within 5 years as well. So there's a win-win solution for everyone that's involved in it.
So they share in the upside as well.
That's correct.
Excellent. Okay, William.
So you said, what's the one thing? I think it would be conversations. I think, I can't speak for all local authorities, but certainly I can speak for Tunbridge Wells. We're very, very keen to promote this. I see it as being a key part of our future as a sustainable borough, and to preserve and enhance the town centre. So very keen to have conversations, and also to hear anything that investors, developers think we could be doing differently. Be that planning policy or anything else.
Excellent. Thanks, William. Simon.
I think for us, we need clarity on planning, as Sanmi's already said. And also we need clarity on, I know it's a big question, but it's for another day, is business rates and how that works. We're struggling massively with the Valuation Office and Maidstone at the moment to get clarity about how they view workspace and how it should be valued. And I think that then responds directly to William's point, which is dialogue and conversation. The one thing that we do struggle with local authorities when we're looking to invest into a borough is to have a go-to person to just be able to share that dialogue and share that conversation to understand where this investment will end up.
Excellent. Guys, I really appreciate your time. This is an ongoing dialogue. In fact, I spent an hour and a half with a local authority in Kent with a group just going through this exact thing yesterday. So the conversation doesn't end here. It will continue. Locate in Kent, we saw demand for flexible office space and a shortage of supply coming up last summer. So we set up something called the Coworking Collective, which most of the flexible office providers in Kent belong to. And we've got a brilliant chair in Janet Halliburton who runs things at Kent Science Park. So we have you know, we are doing everything we can to keep this dialogue going and to stimulate more. Just before we go, I think we've got one question. Sarah, who have we got our one question from?
Yeah, we've got a question from Paul Kelly about cycling to work. Needs a good cycling infrastructure, and how is this being seriously addressed in Kent towns?
William, are you on this?
Yeah, I've put as quick as I could type. I've put a response in because I sensed you're about to close the session. So absolutely agree. It is vital. I think so. Highways as a Kent County Council function. I might get shot for this, but I think there hasn't been a huge amount of appetite to date, but that is absolutely changing. Under the kind of COVID-19, there was something called the Emergency Active Travel Scheme that was introduced. Now, it was done badly by central government, who kind of gave us a week to put bids in and then sat on them for a month. But that's seen some temporary schemes come in, and 80% of that funding has been held back to look at how temporary schemes can be made permanent. And there's also a big package of funding the government's promising around something called gear change, which is looking at how you can promote cycling. We're super keen on it in Tunbridge Wells. We're absolutely looking at how we can bake it into our new developments. But retrofitting it to existing roads is very expensive, particularly because you need segregation in order to make people feel safe.
Yeah, there's a great scheme in Ashford with Brompton where you can come out of the state. You have the a Brompton app, and you can pre-book a Brompton phone. So you come straight out the station, take it out the locker, and there's your Brompton. You're off for the day, and all the rest of it. And interestingly, before COVID, it was always empty because I think people picked them up and took them to London. And but now actually it's being used in reverse as it was intended to. People getting off at Ashford, picking up a bike and cycling around Ashford for meetings. I really appreciate our guests today, Sanmi Adegoke, William Benson, and Simon Benton. You've been brilliant. I really appreciate getting up early and coming along to all of this.